People often say birthdays are meant to be filled with love, laughter, and family. But mine became the day everything I thought I knew about family shattered. I had spent years quietly paying for every hidden corner of our home: rent, groceries, utilities, even my mother's medicine, while they carried on as if life flowed easily through their management. I never complained, never asked for thanks. I believed love meant sacrifice, and I gave until I had nothing left for myself. But on my birthday, in front of relatives and friends, my sister grabbed the front of my dress, tore it down the middle, and screamed that I was selfish and bad because I refused to hand over my ATM card. My parents didn't defend me. They didn't stop her. Instead, they told me to leave my own house, humiliated and unwanted. That was the night I walked away, and with me went every lifeline they had. The bills, the food, the comfort, the roof over their heads, everything they had taken for granted collapsed the moment I was gone. They thought they were punishing me, but what they really did was set me free. And when the truth finally came out, it didn't just break their pride. It destroyed the very foundation of the life they had built on my sacrifices. This is the story of the birthday that ended one chapter of my life and began another. My name is Chloe, and on the night of my birthday, I thought I was finally going to feel special. The living room glowed with strings of lights. The cake sat proudly on the center table, and for once, I allowed myself to hope that maybe my family would appreciate me. I had spent years quietly holding everything together, paying bills, covering expenses, making sure our house never fell apart, but no one ever seemed to notice. I told myself that tonight might be different. At first, the party seemed normal. Friends and relatives were gathered, music floated softly in the background, and I could feel everyone's eyes on me when my sister leaned close, her voice dripping with entitlement. "Give me your ATM card," she demanded, loud enough for several people nearby to hear. I froze.
What?
Why would I do that? Her eyes narrowed. "Because I need it. Don't act like you can't spare it. Just give it to me." I shook my head.
No.
"It's my card, and I'm not handing it over. You have your own money, use it." The room fell silent. Guests turned toward us as my sister's face twisted in anger. Then, before I could react, she grabbed the front of my dress and yanked hard. The sound of fabric tearing echoed like a whip crack in the middle of the party. Gasps filled the room. I clutched the ripped edges to my chest, trembling in shock and humiliation. "You're so selfish and bad," she shouted, pointing at me as though I were some kind of criminal. "You never do anything for this family." I stood there stunned, words trapped in my throat. My eyes darted to my parents, begging silently for them to defend me, to stop this nightmare. Instead, my mother's voice cut through the whispers. "Get out," she hissed. My father didn't hesitate. "You heard her. Leave this house right now. You've embarrassed us enough." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. On my own birthday, torn clothes hanging off my body, I was being kicked out of the house I had been silently supporting for years. No one in that room knew that every light shining above their heads, every bill paid on time, every comfort they enjoyed, was because of me. I felt tears burning my eyes, but I swallowed them down. Without a word, I turned and walked toward the door, each step heavier than the last. Laughter and music had stopped completely. Only silence followed me. That was the moment I decided. I was done being their provider, their scapegoat, their invisible backbone. If they wanted me gone, then gone I would be. But they had no idea what was about to happen next. I didn't pack a suitcase. I didn't shout, scream, or beg. I simply slipped off the party sash that still hung awkwardly over my torn clothes and left it draped across the chair. My hands shook as I reached for the doorknob, but I didn't let anyone see my tears. If they wanted me gone, I would go, but not empty of dignity. The cool night air hit my face like a slap, sharp and cleansing. I walked down the familiar driveway, without looking back at the house I had once called home. For years, I had worked overtime shifts, skipped things I wanted, and sacrificed quietly just to make sure my parents and sister had everything they needed. Rent never went unpaid. The fridge never went empty. The electricity never flickered, because I always made sure the bill was covered before the deadline. And yet, on my birthday, they had called me selfish. As I walked toward the small bus stop at the corner of our street, I pressed my phone tightly in my hand. A dozen notifications lit up the screen from guests at the party, whispers and gossip already circulating. But not one message was from my parents. Not one from my sister. They had kicked me out like I was disposable, and then turned back to their celebration. That was the moment I made my vow. No more, I whispered to myself. From tonight I stop. No more bills. No more hidden payments. No more saving them from the mess they created. By the time the bus arrived, I felt lighter, almost as if the weight of the entire household had been lifted from my shoulders. I rode into the city with nothing but a small bag and my phone, but for the first time in years, I had something far more important than money or security. I had freedom. Little did they know, my absence would expose everything. The lights that once burned so bright in that house would soon go dark, and with it, the lies they told themselves. My new room was nothing more than a small studio apartment with peeling paint and a rickety ceiling fan, but to me, it felt like a palace. For the first time in years, the space was mine alone, no one barging in, no accusations, no demands. I dropped my bag on the bed and sat down, staring at the silence. That night, I opened the folder I had kept hidden for so long. Receipts, utility slips, and bank statements spilled across the table in neat stacks. They told the story my family had never cared to notice. I remembered the first time it began. My father had forgotten to pay the electricity bill. The house was plunged into darkness, and everyone panicked. Without a word, I logged into my account and cleared the payment. The lights came back the next morning, and everyone acted as if it had been a simple error, nothing more. No one asked how it was fixed. Then came the water bill. Then groceries. Then my mother's medical prescriptions. Over time, it became routine. I would quietly pay and file the slip away. While my sister flaunted her new clothes and gadgets, I worked late shifts, skipped outings with friends, and ate the cheapest meals to stretch my salary. They never noticed the sacrifices. They never even asked. As I sifted through the papers, I realized I had built a timeline of their dependence on me, a trail of proof that I wasn't the selfish one. In fact, without me, they wouldn't have lasted a single month in that house. And now, they were about to find out exactly what that meant. I leaned back in my chair and allowed myself a small, bitter smile. Every overdue bill that would soon land on their doorstep was not my failure, it was theirs. For years, I had been their safety net. But now, the net was gone. What they thought was strength of their own had always been my sacrifice. And the moment they kicked me out, they cut that lifeline forever. It didn't take long for the silence of my absence to roar through the walls of that house. I didn't need to be there to imagine it. The proof began arriving in my inbox and through the muted family group chat. 3 days after my birthday, the electricity company sent a final warning notice. Payment overdue. I smiled faintly when I saw it, because I knew exactly how many months I had been covering that bill. My father must have stared at the red-stamped paper, confused, wondering how such a mistake could happen. Mistake? No. It was just reality catching up. By the end of the week, the water companies sent their own notice. The grocery store, where my mother always sent me with her list, declined their usual monthly tab. Without me quietly transferring money, their credit had run dry. In my mind, I could hear the arguments brewing. My father pacing in anger, demanding answers. My mother sighing dramatically, saying, "Why isn't anything working?" And my sister, arms crossed, glaring at them both before pointing the finger where she always did, at me. "She's the reason," she would say, spitting my name like poison. "She left us to suffer because she's bitter and selfish."
But the truth was crueler than that.
For the first time in years, they were simply facing life without the invisible shield I had built for them. Friends who had been at the party started whispering too. A neighbor told me, in hushed tones, that the lights in the house had gone out one evening. My family had been forced to sit in darkness, candles flickering while my sister stomped and cursed. My father stormed outside, embarrassed by the stares of the neighbors. It was almost poetic. The very comforts they had thrown in my face as proof that they didn't need me were crumbling one by one. And still, not a single apology. Not a single message asking how I had managed to keep everything afloat for so long. Instead, I received a short, angry text from my mother. "Come back and fix this. We can't handle it without you." I read it once, twice, and then set the phone down. My vow held firm. "No more," I whispered again into the quiet of my little apartment. For the first time, the chaos was no longer mine to carry. The phone rang late on a Sunday night. I almost didn't answer, but something told me I should. My father's name flashed on the screen. I braced myself before sliding my thumb across to accept. The first words out of his mouth weren't a greeting. "Do you have any idea what's happening here?" His voice thundered, every syllable tight with anger. I stayed calm. "I assume the bills are piling up." There was a pause, then a furious scoff. "The power company is threatening to disconnect us. The water bill is overdue. And the landlord says we're behind on rent. What did you do? Did you sabotage something before you left?" I closed my eyes and took a breath. "No, Dad. I simply stopped paying for everything." My mother's voice suddenly cut in, shrill and desperate. "What do you mean you stopped paying? That's not your job. We are the parents. You are only supposed to help sometimes." "Sometimes?" I said bitterly. "Every single month, I carried the house on my back. Rent, groceries, medicine, utilities, all of it. I've been the one holding everything together while you two pretended it was your management." Silence on the line. For a moment, I imagined them sitting in the living room, staring at each other with dawning horror. Then my sister's voice snapped through in the background. "She's lying. She just wants to make herself look good. She's selfish, always has been." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Selfish? Look around. Without me, the house is crumbling. Does that look like selfishness, or does it look like truth finally catching up?" My father's voice lowered, sharp as a knife. "You need to come back. Fix this. You're still our child, and you owe us." The anger in me finally cracked through the calm. "No. I don't owe you anything. You kicked me out on my birthday, remember? You called me selfish when I was the one sacrificing everything. From now on, you handle your own mess. I'm done." Before they could reply, I ended the call. My hand trembled, but it wasn't fear. It was release. For the first time, I had drawn a line they could not cross. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. Their desperation would grow. Their masks would slip. And soon everyone else would see who they really were. Word spread quickly that my family was struggling because of me. My mother called relatives, my father complained to neighbors, and my sister played the victim in group chats. They painted me as the ungrateful child who abandoned them when they needed me most. So when my aunt invited me to a family gathering a week later, I knew exactly what was waiting for me. My parents wanted an audience. They wanted me shamed back into submission. I almost didn't go. But then I glanced at the folder of receipts, bank transfers, and statements I had stacked neatly on my desk. Years of proof. My story in numbers. Their lies in black and white. So I went. The house was buzzing when I arrived. Relatives crowded the living room, plates of food balanced in their laps. My parents stood near the center, faces tight with forced smiles. My sister lounged on the couch, arms crossed, eyes gleaming like she'd already won. "There she is," my mother said loudly the moment I stepped inside. "The selfish one." Murmurs rippled through the room. My father raised his hand for silence. "We've called everyone here, so you'll all understand what we've been dealing with. Our child abandoned us, stopped helping, stopped supporting us. Now we're drowning in bills because of her." I let them finish. Let them dig their own hole. Then, without a word, I placed the folder on the coffee table and opened it. "I think everyone deserves the full story," I said calmly. One by one, I laid out the documents. The electricity receipts with my name on them. Bank statements showing rent transfers from my account. Pharmacy invoices I had covered for my mother's medicine. Grocery bills in my handwriting. This I tapped the growing pile. Is what selfishness looks like? Because for the last 3 years, while you called me ungrateful, I paid every single one of these. Gasps spread through the room. My aunt leaned forward, eyes wide. Is this true? My parents stammered, unable to answer. My sister leapt up, her voice sharp. She's lying. Those could be fake. But my uncle cut her off. I work at the utility company. These are real. Every account is in her name. The room turned. Eyes that once judged me now burned holes into my parents and sister. Whispers rose into accusations. How could you treat her that way? How could you kick her out? My father tried to salvage dignity, muttering about family sacrifices, but no one listened. The evidence was too strong. The truth was too loud. For the first time, the mask slipped, and everyone saw them for who they really were. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I simply gathered the papers back into the folder and said, "You wanted to expose me. Consider yourselves exposed instead." Then I walked out, leaving behind stunned silence and their collapsing reputation. After the gathering, the whispers spread faster than fire. By the next morning, my phone buzzed with messages from relatives who had once stayed silent. Some sent quiet apologies. Others confessed they had always suspected something was off. My parents' perfect image was cracking, and with each passing day, more truth slipped out. The final blow didn't even come from me. It came from the bank. One evening, I received a call from a distant cousin who worked in finance. "Did you know your parents took out a loan last year?" he asked, his voice careful. My chest tightened. What loan? A big one. Nearly the entire house was used as collateral. The loan was registered under the pretense of your sister's business venture. But none of the repayments were ever made. The bank is circling now. I nearly dropped the phone. So that was it. While I had been stretching every dollar to cover household bills, my parents had quietly signed away the house for my sister's indulgence. Not a business. Not education. Just her endless appetite for shopping, parties, and vacations. The truth was uglier than I had imagined. Within a week, the letters arrived, formal notices from the bank, warning of repossession if payments weren't made. Neighbors saw the envelopes. Family members whispered. The same parents who had boasted about managing everything so well were now on the brink of losing everything. And my sister? She doubled down. She screamed at my parents, called them incompetent, and then pointed her rage back at me. If you hadn't left, none of this would have happened, she spat over the phone. I almost laughed. If I hadn't left, you'd still be living off me while pretending you were successful. This is your mess. Own it. Her voice cracked, but not with guilt, only fury. You'll regret this. But I didn't regret a thing. For the first time in my life, I wasn't their safety net. And watching their carefully crafted lies unravel without me was more liberating than I could ever explain. They thought kicking me out would silence me. Instead, it exposed them. And their fall had only just begun. The storm broke inside that house, and I didn't even need to be there to hear it. News traveled through relatives, neighbors, and even a few of my sister's so-called friends who had once laughed with her at my expense. The picture they painted was chaotic. My father paced the living room late into the night, slamming papers against the table, shouting that everything was spiraling out of control. We're drowning in bills. The bank is calling every day. How could this happen? My mother, her voice tight with shame, shot back. Don't you dare put this all on me. You agreed to that loan. You signed the papers. All for her. She pointed at my sister, her finger trembling with rage. My sister exploded, her voice shrill and venomous. I did it for us. I deserved a business. I deserved a chance to live better than all of you. And if she hadn't abandoned us, none of this would be happening. The walls shook with their accusations. Voices rose higher and higher, each blaming the other. For years, I had been their common scapegoat. But now that I was gone, they had no shield, no one to absorb their anger. For the first time, they were forced to face each other. Neighbors said the shouting spilled into the street one evening. My father yelling, My mother crying, my sister screaming about losing her lifestyle. The same family that had thrown me out with cold faces was now unraveling in front of the world. And still, not once did any of them acknowledge the truth, that their fall was of their own making. When a relative called me later, urging me to return, I shook my head.
No.
This is their storm, not mine. They chose this path the moment they called me selfish. I set the phone down, my heart calm. For the first time, the house that once chained me was nothing more than noise in the distance. And I had no intention of ever walking back inside. My new apartment wasn't grand, but it was mine. I paid each bill with my own money and watched as the lights stayed on, the fridge stayed full, and peace filled the air. No screaming matches. No demands. No one tearing me down. Just silence and freedom. For the first time in years, I started thinking about myself. I picked up extra hours at work, not because I had to, but because I wanted to save for my future instead of pouring every paycheck into theirs. Within 2 months, I had money set aside for an emergency fund, something I'd never been able to do while carrying the weight of the entire household. And then something unexpected happened. My boss called me into his office one Friday afternoon. "I've noticed the dedication you've shown," he said, sliding a document across the desk. "We need someone reliable for this new position. The raise isn't small." I looked at the number and nearly choked. It was more than I ever dreamed of making. For a moment, I thought about all the years my family had dismissed me as nothing, all the times they called me selfish while draining me dry. And now, here I was, being recognized for exactly the qualities they had thrown away. I accepted, of course. And that night, I celebrated not with a crowd of relatives who only knew how to take, but with a couple of close friends who had stuck by me through the storm. We ordered takeout, laughed until our stomachs hurt, and toasted to a future where I finally came first. Meanwhile, through whispers from relatives, I learned that my family's troubles were deepening. The bank was no longer sending warnings. They were preparing to seize the house. My sister's so-called friends had abandoned her when she could no longer fund their outings. My parents, once the proud hosts of family gatherings, now avoided everyone, too ashamed to face the truth. And I was thriving. For years, I had been the invisible backbone of their lives. Now I was finally building a life that was visible, strong, and fully mine. It felt like justice. It was almost poetic that the call came on my next birthday. A full year had passed since the night they tore me apart and threw me out. I was sitting in my new apartment, surrounded by friends, laughter, and a cake that I had bought with my own hard-earned money. My phone buzzed, and when I saw the caller ID, the room seemed to go quiet. It was my mother. For a moment, I thought about ignoring it. But then I answered, curiosity tugging at me. Her voice was shaky, tired, nothing like the sharp tone I remembered. "Please, we need you. The house is being taken. Your father is sick with stress. Your sister is lost. We can't do this without you." I glanced at the warm glow of my apartment, at the friends smiling and waiting for me to rejoin them, and I realized how far I had come. "You managed fine when you kicked me out," I said evenly. "Now manage without me." There was a pause. My sister's voice broke in, furious as ever. "You owe us. You're our family. Stop acting like you're better than us." I couldn't help but laugh softly. "No, I don't owe you anything. Respect is the price of my presence, and you could never pay it." Before they could say another word, I ended the call. The weight I had carried for years, the endless bills, the silence, the abuse, was finally gone. They were left to face the consequences of their choices, while I stepped fully into a life that was mine. That night, as I cut my cake, I made one more vow. Never again would I let anyone call me selfish for choosing myself. Because sometimes, walking away isn't selfish, it's survival. And this time, I wasn't just surviving. I was finally living.